We got sound.
Okay, good.
EWOK, welcome.
Thanks, bro.
Of course, and it's our pleasure to have you on here to just talk about your illustrious career and all the trouble that you've caused around the world and all the beautiful things that you've painted. And so, for me as someone that is not part of your crew, hasn't lived in the cities that you've lived in, this is an important moment to really jump in and learn about what you've been doing and where you're coming from and how you got started. So can you take us back to the beginning? Can you take us back to your first discovery or encounter with graffiti? When was that, and do you have a memory of that?
The earliest memory I can remember is probably the opening sequence to Welcome Back, Kotter.
That's early.
I remember I used to watch that show when I was a kid. I was probably like 5 or 6 at the time, and I remember I don't know what it was, but I would always look for in that opening credits scene, look for the part with the trains that pulled in. I just thought it looked so cool, and like just the idea of New York was such a like magical thing, even as like a kid. And then seeing the subways painted, it it just kind of reinforced the vibe of what I imagined New York to be about. I don't know. I mean, it was one of those things where there was no one particular time. I remember instances of seeing it, seeing different graffiti tags, throw-ups, and stuff like that throughout my youth, like way before I had ever really thought to do it. It was just kind of a captivating thing when I would see stuff out on the street, which was a rarity because where I at the time I was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so there really wasn't like a lot of street level graffiti that you would see. But if I would go to Chicago or places like that, I would see certain things. I remember seeing I went to New York for an art, it was like art class field trip. It was like we went to some museums and stuff, and I remember the first time I saw like somebody do a tag on a "Hello, my name is" sticker. Like it was just stuck on like a marble wall, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I think that's graffiti too. But like I had no frame of reference for a lot of it. I just remember little flashes of it throughout my childhood, and it was always kind of something interesting because I was into art, but this seemed like a different thing, like that was kind of loosely affiliated but had more subversive like energy behind it, and then that was like really appealing to me.
And so from there, when was it that you actually met a writer, like the first writer? When did that happen?
I don't know. I mean, like me and my friends that I used to skate with, my buddy Mike, that he ended up being the notorious like freight train writer Ember. We kind of started around the same time because we used to skateboard, and him and my other buddy Ed, they went off to like, I think they were counselors at some summer camp in upstate New York. So when they came back from that, they all had like Air Maxes and like baggy jeans and stuff, and they're like yo, this is graffiti. Like, I guess a bunch of the little kids at the camp were writers, and they kind of brought back all the information. So we're like, okay, we're gonna start doing graffiti now, because we had a little bit of information to go on. And so I remember my friend Ed had this, it was like a Datsun, like a real shitty like beater car that I think his parents bought him for a couple $100. And we would just do tags all over the car. We were gluing like juice boxes to the roof and just making it like this weird art car that, we thought we were doing graffiti, but we really didn't know anything about graffiti. We just knew what a tag was. And then we would kind of draw these crappy bubble letters and stuff. And we would do tags with like wax or like crayons and stuff at our skate spots, like on the curbs and stuff. So that was kind of like, I mean, I guess technically you could say those were maybe the first writers I met.
Sure.
There was a
Right, so your
dude.
friends.
Yeah, yeah, they were at least the first people I knew that kind of had a clue what, you know, what was up, even though we were still kind of all in the dark at that point, but they were a little ahead of me in terms of just having a foundation of like information on it. Um, I'm trying to think. Oh, there was a kid, Obi-Wan from Milwaukee, who was really dope. He I think he kind of kicked it with some like Chicago people back in the day, and he got kind of put on to sort of like real classic style. Like I remember he was really dope with characters and stuff, and he did this he what is it, the I think it's Grandmaster Flash, that it's like a jungle sometimes,
Yeah.
that song. He did a big production with all these like zoo animals with like Kangol and Cazal like glasses on and stuff, and it was insane. Like at that point I was like, yeah, I need to figure out how to do this. Like just weird little things. I remember like how he did like shines on the glasses that it's like, how do you do that with spray paint? You know, and I think that was probably what launched me into like, okay, I got to take this like way more serious. And yeah,
Were
that was,
you a teenager at the time, or how old?
yeah, I was probably around like 16 or so, 16, 17.
Okay, and so I'm guessing this is like the early '90s or something.
Yeah, I would say maybe 89, 90, something like that.
Okay, so when did you make? How did you make the leap from seeing it and being inspired and sort of doodling a little bit or tagging a bit to actually starting to paint with pieces or with throw ups? Like how did that work out for you?
I think it was yeah, it was basically like once I got out of my parents' house and I was away at school. I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and there was kind of like the beginnings of a scene that was already happening there. You know, I think in hindsight, I had learned about some of the older writers from Minneapolis that started in, like the maybe mid to late 80s that, were a couple years before I got there. Um, and you would see tags and stuff here and there. So it was kind of like it was more of a scene than what I was what I had back home. But that got me really focusing on like trying to do good tags and bubble letters and stuff like that. And like since it was the first time I was out on my own and I didn't have to worry about getting in trouble with my parents and stuff, I would I would try and acquire spray paint and just go out on these, like I would go out and paint like really hot spots, like not knowing any better, and do these quick little like bubble letter pieces. um yeah, that was probably like when I was actually doing it, even though I still was fairly clueless at the time.
So and how did you go from that to having style or practicing style? Was it just by doing it, or did you have guidance or friends that you were connecting with? How did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, I never really had like a mentor per se, but there was other people in Minneapolis. Like I would say right around the time I got there, within that year, the scene kind of kicked off for real. Like I think prior to that point, there was like a handful of people that had done like, maybe a few pieces and stuff. But I think right when I got there was when, just coincidentally, like there was kind of, I would say maybe like 20, 25 writers from a couple different crews. I remember me and Ember were going to First Avenue to see some concert, and there's a little doorway. We kind of walked past this guy, and we looked ridiculous but appropriate at the time with the big baggy jeans, and I think we had like Adidas Gazelles on and stuff. And this guy, Self One, aka Ember, or sorry, Emer from AKB crew, he kind of like spotted us, and he's like, yeah, I think they're writers. And he just came up to us and was like, yo, what do you guys write? And we were like, oh, how did you know? But like we were pretty obvious about it, I guess. And he said, yeah, we're having a writers meeting at, I'm trying to remember where it was. It was at a park or something. but yeah, we ended up going there and meeting a bunch of writers from the city, and we were freaking out because, you know, we were still like super rookies at that point. But, you know, people had black books and, you know, were smoking weed, and we were like, oh, we're like in the big time now. Like, these dudes are for real. And so there was
Yeah.
a couple of crews like AKB, MAS. And then I think at that meeting, we formed sort of like an all city crew called TCM, which was like Twin Cities Massive. And so it was kind of like people from the different established crews there were kind of all united under one crew. And that lasted for maybe like 6 months, and then people started beefing, and it kind of just fizzled out, and everybody branched off into their own little tribes or whatever.
Yeah. And so you make these connections, and you eventually start to paint, you know, pieces.
Yeah.
You know, is this part of that era that you're talking about?
This was later, but I would say that was probably around late 90s, I'm guessing. Maybe around 2000. I'm not exactly sure.
So this is much later. But what about this?
This was probably like that following summer, right after I started painting. I would say that, like, of all the flicks that you have, I think that's probably one of the oldest ones.
So tell us a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, this was on the tracks in Uptown. Like, I'm sure everybody saw the George Floyd stuff that was happening. Like, this is kind of like, there's a train line that runs through Uptown, and it goes under like 30 blocks of bridges. So each one of these bridges has these walls at the bottom, and it was just like our playground for the next, you know, probably 5 years, where we would go down there and paint pretty much every day. At this time, I was super into like Parliament and Funkadelic, and I was listening to that album America Eats Its Young, and I was like, oh, that would be cool to do like an America piece. And so I was trying to do like these, you know, fades and stuff in the fill, and I had figured out how to acquire the testers caps that came on a couple different things. So I had some clean caps to try and, you know, just I was basically taking some of the ideas I had seen other people do and try and put my own little spin on it. So that was that.
And so this is, you know, you're still a teenager at this point.
Yeah, I was probably like 18 at that point.
And going to school on your own. And it's quite a great piece for such a young and you know, writer in the beginning of his career, and also tackling subjects, so not just painting your own name, but doing something, you know, political. I don't know what's happening on the left side of it, because it gets cut off. But there's like you know, a pole and rope.
Oh, I think it was next to somebody else's thing. I don't know whether, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think that was just
a long time ago.
But I do see, like, at the bottom of the A, you can see there's like some little skulls and stuff I tried to do.
Yes.
And then there's like that kind of angry face and the star on top of the eye. You know, I was trying stuff. I think around this time too, I had seen that. I think maybe part of what inspired me to do this piece was it Slick that did the Ice Cube video? He had something like the Who's the Mac video or something like that.
Yeah, Slick and Risk did the Who's the Mac.
Yeah. I think this piece was kind of heavily influenced by that.
It feels a little bit like that now that you mention that.
Okay, yeah.
So you go from that later on to this, but maybe there's some pieces that are here that are a bit earlier.
Yeah, it's a little jumbled at that time. I haven't been very good about like chronologically sequencing my stuff, and a lot of my old stuff is kind of just out there. I had a lot of hard copies that either got lost in the shuffle moving a bunch of times, but I would say, yeah, this is probably like 95-ish, 94 maybe.
So, you know, living, you know, in that Twin Cities area, that's known as a sort of like a freight hub for the country. So it's no surprise that you started painting the freights there. Was there a lot of that type of activity there in Milwaukee at the time?
I had heard about people like on the south side of Milwaukee that were painting freights, but I never really got into the freight scene in Milwaukee just because I wasn't, I wasn't really painting. I was doodling tags and stuff, but I think my actual graffiti career kind of started in Minneapolis. So
I got it. So now, so this is in Minneapolis, I guess. Is that right?
yeah, yeah,
So was there a scene in Minneapolis? I guess so, right?
yeah. That's basically like when I went away to school, it was in Minneapolis. So everything I talked about going forward was Minneapolis.
And so is when I see you putting up HM, and that's kind of how I was able to discover your older work is through a search for HM crew, and I see all these names, and you have your childhood friend at the top there, Ember.
Yeah.
And I see it on all the freight trains. Tell us a little bit about HM and what that is and what that was about.
Yeah, HM was kind of it was basically born out of the dissolving of another crew, ATD. A lot of us were in this crew ATD, and we kind of had a falling out with one of the main like founders of the crew, and so we ended up dropping that and then sort of reforming a new crew with like kind of the main people, that were really doing stuff at the time. And then over the years, we added some newer heads like Lemon, which was Dasar from Philly, and Nymph. He was another Milwaukee writer. I didn't know him when I was in Milwaukee, but we put him in. He was probably one of the most recent adds, I think, to the crew. This picture you have up, I think my guy Hope did that one. Hope 4.
So this is mostly a Minneapolis sort of crew, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
or at least back then, maybe in the beginning.
Back then, I think we have a couple other people from other states. I'm trying to remember. Spell put in his guy, man, Vism from New York.
Yep.
So he's HM, and then like Dasar from Philly, and yeah, that's basically it. It's pretty much a Minneapolis crew.
And so, but the beautiful thing about these freights is that they go all over the continent, and everybody gets to see them, and no one knows where anybody's from. You just
Right.
got to see the work. I
Yeah.
think the people that write where they're doing the work is the people that are writing monikers that sort of write their location. And so, yeah, so we see this stuff all over the country, having no idea that you guys are from the Midwest, and it's just a surprise. It's totally anonymous.
Yeah.
Which is very, very, very cool thing, because you really don't need to know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to just do something and know that it's like when people would throw they would put a note like in a bottle and just throw it into the ocean. That's sort of the way I looked at doing freights. And then like later on, some of the guys in the crew were like super into like the freight nerd scene, where they would like find the website where they could track where everything was going by the numbers and stuff. I kind of didn't really care about that stuff at all. Like I didn't even really care which cars went to which places. I just enjoyed the zen of like painting, and if it went somewhere, cool. If it didn't, I was fine with that too. But I mean, it is cool when you see it pop up in some random place with like different scenery, like seeing it in the middle of a desert, 2 or 3, 5 years later. Like it's kind of cool. I actually like it when, people will like scribble stuff on it, or they'll paint over part of, like the rail company will paint over part of it. 'Cause it's like, sort of like I've birthed this thing, but it's just out there kind of living its life and getting scars and stuff like that, like things that are kind of out of my control, but it's like living its own life basically after I'm done with it.
When you were painting, focused maybe on freight trains, was it a focus, or were you also painting walls and doing other stuff at the same time?
Yeah, I think there was like maybe a 2 or 3 year span where I was primarily focused on doing freights. I mean, we would still paint walls, if they were available, but freights were just a common enough thing, and we had enough good spots where we could pretty much paint freights a couple times a week. And I think I get the most bang for the buck painting freights, because there's walls I've painted where I'll spend 2 or 3 days on it and put like mad time into it, and at the end I'm just like, it's all right. But I can do a freight in an hour or an hour and a half, and it'll be one of my favorite things I'd done that year. So I think it just feels right, like I think part of the beauty of freights is trying to maximize the amount of style you can put into something within this kind of confined space, and usually a limited amount of time doing it. And I think that's like the real challenge of it.
Sure. And so tell me, with this particular piece as an example, this doesn't look like something traditional where most people at the time were maybe looking at New York style or looking at style from these other regions, maybe an LA style. This looks totally organic. It looks like some kind of a creature, like a living organism almost. Where did this come from, and how did you get to this place with graffiti?
I would say probably my biggest influence with the organic stuff was the movie Akira. I don't know if
Yes.
you've seen that anime, but there's
Yes.
this scene at the end where Tetsuo is in like the Olympic Stadium, and he's got all that like organic shit like flying out of his arm, and it's morphing into like biomechanical nightmare. Like, I don't know, that scene was really impactful on my graffiti for like a long time, and I think that kind of influenced a lot of those type of styles.
Kind of amazing where we find our influences from, because that was a major blockbuster film. That was like the first big anime film to go worldwide, I think.
Yeah.
And so it had a lot of impact, but it's great to know that that's sort of what you saw, and that impacted you in that way.
I think I would also have to say I had seen there's one piece in particular that Reese did that really got me thinking about doing some kind of weird, like, out of the box type of stuff. I think at the beginning when I first started painting, I had that like kind of naive sense of like I want to like totally reinvent the wheel as far as graffiti was concerned, and I would say like almost to a fault I wanted to do things that were like totally different, and that kind of like steered me away from learning a lot of fundamental steps where I kind of had to go back and supplement that stuff later, which I think was both good and bad for a couple different reasons. But yeah, I think just when I first started, that was like definitely a focus. I know a lot of people when graffiti, they kind of just see what other people are doing and then kind of do some really just straightforward bar based letters. And that was
Yeah.
never really that much of a interest to me. Like, I didn't want to just emulate somebody else's style. I wanted to like contribute, my own creativity to it. So I think that's always been kind of a driving force in like what I've been doing stylistically.
I mean, and this piece here from, I think it's 2000, you're definitely doing your own thing, and you're incorporating, sort of this illustration cartoon style of painting. You can see it in the K, you can see it. I mean, it's everywhere. It's all of it. It looks like it's straight out of like an underground comic book, or
Yeah.
like an anime film or something.
Yeah.
And so I get what you're saying, where you're almost, maybe there's not even any letters in there, even though I could see them. You're just really painting all these these different forms.
Yeah, it's weird looking at these old ones because I feel like these wavelengths in terms of like different eras of style, it's hard to like revisit them. You know, like even if I wanted to paint a piece like this, it wouldn't really be that natural anymore because I've kind of, you know, like it sort of ran its course at the time, and trying to go back to it, it's like it's not that natural anymore. Like I think a lot of it has to do with just where your head is at in that moment.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, but here, you know, you see a tremendous amount of creativity, and also, you know, can control and you know, painting ability. I mean, when you look at, you know, all this stuff, the highlights, the three-dimensional aspect of it. I mean, you know what you're doing at this point. You know, maybe stylistically, you're you know, going into uncharted territories or things like that, but from a painterly aspect, you got it.
Yeah,
At least
thanks.
you have this style, right?
Yeah,
This is, and
yeah,
you know, and just a year later, I think this is a year later, this is where you're at.
yeah. I think that was that Scribble Jam.
This is,
I
yeah, from Scribble Jam.
I always noticed like stuff after the fact, but I think I just went right over that background with that kind of black and yellow. I wish I would have just buffed that because it's like
The
so distracting. That
It's
wasn't
like
actually.
it's like it's going into a portal or something.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, maybe it looks like it was meant to be there, but that was just me being lazy, not buffing out the background.
I get it. So
Yeah.
again, so here your style is changing again, and there are these sort of these strings or these tentacles coming out of your letters and wrapping around the other letters, and so it's definitely has that sort of organic or sort of organism feeling that you were talking about when you were describing Akira.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, kind of the manifestation of that is this?
Yeah, I think maybe at this, I'm not positive, but I think maybe I was really trying to find the right balance between like two-dimensional and three-dimensional. Like I remember early on seeing like Dime and those like 3D, like I think Ernie had some cool like 3D stuff. There's a couple of people that did really cool three-dimensional graffiti, and like I remember me and all my friends were trying our hand at doing something similar to that. But I kind of realized like there's doing straight three-dimensional graffiti, there's only a handful of people that do it well. And I was more interested in like trying to maximize the benefits of doing a 2D kind of traditional flat piece with a you know, a couple elements of 3D or at least like texture to it. So I think this is sort of somewhere along that process.
Right, right. I see more like the in the E you have like this slime or teeth or something coming through that looks like it's more three-dimensionally rendered
Yeah.
versus the rest of the letter E.
Yeah. Like I think somebody that did like a really cool fusion of like the 2D and the 3D was at this time Tyke from WR was doing really cool stuff like that. So he was pretty influential on my style also around that time.
And so at this point, are you, you know, starting to be aware of what's happening around the country and start to connect to people outside of the Midwest or the Twin Cities, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, we had, you know, we had a couple people, like Monk was from the East Coast, from Boston. And so he kind of brought some of that scene to the Twin Cities. I think he was going to school in St. Paul at the time. So, and I remember we were very aware of what was going on in the rest of the country, as far as like New York, New Jersey, Philly, Miami, San Francisco, LA. Like we were aware of like who was doing stuff in all the major cities. And I think at the same time we were kind of soaking up all those influences also. And this was, you know, these were probably like the last couple of years before the internet really turned into like a thing, at least in terms of being influential in the whole graffiti scene. But this was the era where like we were still trading physical copies of photos in the mail. So around this time, I think I was trading with people like Sever, Boo from AWR. I was trading with Dax from Atlanta. A bunch of different people. I know like later on, I think C's was sending us a lot of stuff. And this was around the time that we were working on Life Sex Die magazine.
Yeah.
Which, little backstory on that was we didn't really ever set out to make like a national magazine, I don't think. We were kind of just trying, like it was really important to us to put Minneapolis, or like the Twin Cities, on the map in terms of the national graffiti scene, because I felt like there was a lot of like up and coming talented people there that that didn't really have a lot of like national recognition. And so everybody was, you know, trying to put themselves on and get, you know, get their own personal shine. But I think even more importantly, we were trying to just like represent for the Twin Cities. And so when we would go to these jams like Scribble Jam and Paint Lewis and stuff like that, we were real trying to like show out for like the Twin Cities. Cause it was funny. Like I remember being at like Scribble and Paint Lewis, and people would ask where we were from, and we would say Minneapolis, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I think I heard of Minneapolis before." Like they would like butcher the name, and they're like, "That's by like New York, right?" And we'd be like, "No, it's, you know, it's in the Midwest." Like people had no idea where it was. And I was talking to somebody recently, like with all the crazy stuff that happened with like the George Floyd thing, and you know, just all the protests that kind of jumped off. In and around the Twin Cities within the last like 2 or 3 years. I feel like everybody kind of knows where it is now. It's just it got recognition for a lot of negative stuff.
Yeah, it got finally put on the map.
Yeah.
In a major, everybody knows Minneapolis now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's infamous, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting. You know, you mentioned a couple of things, and I'm not so sure that many of our listeners might know what you're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about what Scribble Jam was and what Paint Lewis was?
Yeah, they were kind of I don't know what you can compare it to with like today, maybe like a meeting of style almost. But it was basically, you know, people would just organize an event where writers from all over the country would be invited to come out to Scribble Jam was in Cincinnati, and Paint Lewis was in St. Louis. Like Paint Lewis had a huge, it was like a retainer wall on the St. Louis River, or maybe it's the Mississippi River, I can't remember. But yeah, it was like a, you know, couple miles of just like blank wall that they got permission to have this event. So, you know, this is the first time I met a lot of people from like the West Coast and the East Coast and all that. You know, first time I met Tyke and some of the CBS dudes.
So people were coming from all over the country to participate. So I just, you know, from what I remember, because this is not going back, I mean, these were jams, so to speak, locally organized by writers, right? If I'm correct. Yeah, these are organized by writers, with writers being invited to, you know, from all over the country, and people driving into town or flying into town to paint.
Yeah.
You know, had existed in Europe. So Europe, there were always writers doing these sort of jams or these festivals, these graffiti jams, and writers from all over Europe would go. But this is the first time that it was really happening in the United States. And so it was a very interesting thing to see it happen, and then happen in a place where it was a bit unexpected. You know, it wasn't like Los Angeles or New York. It was, you know, Minneapolis, or it was St. Louis rather, or Cincinnati. And so, and you know, and I remember hearing stories and seeing videos, and it was a thing that was around with a few epic battles, and his sort of historic get-togethers. And so you know, something that doesn't necessarily happen in the United States at all.
Yeah.
You know, and I see EWOK 1 is on here, and I know that there's a
What
story about a sort of a battle of you guys coming
Yeah.
together at one of these jams to finally, you know, have this moment to you know, show off each other's style or to meet or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of acrimonious, I think, you know, for probably, I would say 5 or 6 years. But I think the longer you're in one of these scenes, it's like your social circles just start overlapping to the point where it's kind of silly to, you know, have beefs over such trivial things. Like, there's only so many words out there, and you know, I think basically we started probably writing right around the same time. I never really actually asked him, but yeah, like we're cool now. Like, we're, you know, we've been talking about doing some kind of project or something. You know,
It's interesting. We're so possessive with these identities and these words that we adopt for ourselves. At
yeah,
least, you know, in our youth, and you know, there could only be one of this or two of that. You know, it's sort of like
yeah,
this really sort of, you know, big ego play at ownership of these words and these identities. But you know, I think what we've seen with you guys writing the same word is that beyond the word there's identity,
yeah,
and there's style, and there's you know, uniqueness in how, you know, you approach it. And so there's no mistaking that there's two different people, there's two totally different things happening, and so there's no confusion. You know, I think, you know, early on people were confused about that, you know. And so
yeah.
I mean, I don't think people were confused about you guys. I think people were confused that there couldn't be more than one, because there would be confusion.
Right. Yeah, I think it was just kind of par for the course in terms of, like, I mean, I don't know, I only know the perspective I came from, but we got the impression just from the, you know, like the media and the things we would see, that like this was back, I think, especially during the era of like tag, you know, like tag banging was kind of like a thing, and like graffiti had like a way more kind of just aggressive, like fighting, violence kind of connotation with it. So I think just the climate of this, the graffiti scene at the time was, you know, like you have to battle somebody if they have your name. Like, you can't let somebody. And I mean, realistically, like that was never really how I felt about it. I just felt sort of an obligation to do the things that you're supposed to do as a graffiti writer. You know what I mean?
So like uphold a tradition or something.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of weird, but you know, like in hindsight, I was like, what was all that for? Like, I don't even really like the name Ewok that much to begin with. I think it's like one of the dumber names. So the fact that we, you know, spent so much energy, like, you know, fighting, and, you know, not like physical fighting, but, you know, just like having some kind of like soap opera around it. At the same time, I mean, I think in hindsight, I get so many comments from people that, you know, bug out about that battle being like this epic thing. And to me, it was just like, yeah, you know, it was just me and this other dude painting the same word. I do really, I'd say the best thing to come out of that though is just the whole toilet theme. Like, I've really been running with that ever since.
So for those of us that don't necessarily know it, what was that battle from an imagery perspective, since you're bringing up the toilet scene?
um, yeah, I think if my memory is correct, I think when I showed up to the wall, I think he got there a couple hours earlier than I did, and he had his piece. We had like two big spots that were already buffed for us, like kind of at the entrance to the whole event. And so he had like half of it, and I had the other half. And in the middle of his spot, he had like a piece that maybe took up about a third of the overall wall, and not even like the top or the bottom. It was kind of just like in the middle, and then there was like a bunch of empty space around it, and he did this piece that was relatively small, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, I thought we were like really gonna battle, you know. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna do my thing, and I pretty much just tried to like dominate the whole space. That was the piece that you had up a little while ago. Which one was it? The one with the dairy, like the real logo in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was my piece from the battle.
Got it.
And so he had all this empty space, and I would just get chatter. Not that one. It was one or two slides before that, I think. One before that one. Yeah. So I remember like they brought us the scaffold, and I was like, oh, okay, dope. I'm gonna like go extra big just because this is like a battle and we're like center stage on this thing. So I did like a 2-story tall piece basically, and I was like, well, mine is like dwarfing his, and I was like, I wonder what he's gonna do with all that extra space. And then I saw him leave for a while. I thought he went to go get lunch or something, and he came back, and he had like 2 or 3 Home Depot bags with all like cans of white. And I was like, what is he gonna do? And he started filling out this huge like shape. It was to the left of my E. And he spent probably like a good 40 minutes just filling it in. And so me and my friends are standing back from the wall, and I'm trying to figure out what he's doing. And I was like, wait a minute, is that like a toilet? And then sure enough, like he painted this like 15-foot tall toilet, and it had a big like green arrow going into the bowl. It says, "You gets flushed," and that just became like a running source of comedy for the next probably 20 years. And then I think the following year, the following Scribble Jam, I wrote like Mr. Toilet next to my piece, and then I started making like these toilet characters and stuff. I was just like, oh, that's funny. And yeah, I don't know. I just had fun with it. And I think like, you know, it's just one of those things.
That's pretty funny. So I wanna jump.
Yeah, you can see it says Mr. Toilet on the one before.
Yeah, this one says Mr. Toilet on it.
Yeah.
so it's been a running gag for years.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you start to really go deeper, it looks like, into this sort of organic feeling thing. Like I feel like these are sort of animation cells from these, you know, Ghost in the Machine, or these films that where the humans are being taken over by these organisms. And you go deeper in this direction for a while. It seems like it kept seeing these references. And you see him, you know, here, maybe less so, but it's still present.
Yeah.
But, you know, by here, I think, you know, at this point, I think I think you're in Los Angeles already. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I was, I actually, to just for the record, I've never actually lived in Los Angeles. I live in Santa Ana, which is in Orange County. So
Okay.
It's like 45 minutes from Los Angeles. It just saves me the conversation with a lot of people that don't know Southern California to just say Los Angeles, but I don't want to be claiming a city that I've never actually lived in.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
you're you know, you're in Cali, in Santa Ana, and you connect with AWR, MSK, and you know, your style starts to change a bit. You still have the organic ness and all this 3D stuff that we've seen, but your letters start to sort of get a different sort of a funk or a movement to it that isn't necessarily present from the stuff from 10 years earlier. Was that part of, you know, joining this new crew, or how did that come about, or, you know, why'd you make that decision?
It was never really a decision. I mean, I think I kind of just go through cycles with what I'm trying to accomplish. I don't really want to spend too much time on that piece because that one's pretty horrible, but yeah, that one's not that much better. I don't know. I was trying a bunch of stuff, you know, like I like this one, even though the letters are kind of bad, but I like the way I painted it.
There's definitely more, or it's intricate in a different way.
Yeah, I think this one probably has more traditional isms to it. Like it's got the, drop down 3D, and kind of the way it's painted is more similar to like a traditional style, even though the letter shapes are pretty weird. I think one of the things, going back to the question you asked me, I don't think being out on the West Coast and being around like the other like AWR, MSK guys influenced my style that much. Like we would kind of, we would vibe off of what one another were doing and maybe like nibble around the edges of like different ideas and stuff. But I think like if you think about the mid 90s, early 2000s, like AWR, MSK stuff, like everybody had pretty unique styles. Like even though we were a pretty tight crew, I think everybody's stuff was different. Like
I agree.
Yeah. So I don't think like,
but you guys end up, there's these little things like you said that you guys maybe share, little doodads or little things that are sort of common. And I was always curious about this sort of elongated, skinny arrows that started to appear at this time.
Yeah.
And here you see them right off your E or at the bottom of your E, and they're sort of these almost like pointing fingers or something.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. I have to give credit where credit's due. Those are rhymes arrows.
Got it. Yeah, there was all these little things that were introduced, and that all of a sudden you started to see them more. And it was around this time that I started to see that. But you still had, in your uniqueness, you were doing more of this three-dimensional organic thing that the other members of your crew were not necessarily doing, with maybe the exception of Augur, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And you see it even when you're going simple, you're still also adding some of that 3D element to it.
Yeah.
And there's this is a very good one, but also funny in the sense that you bring back the toilet.
Yeah. I knew that was one in the early days of like Art Basel, and I knew that there was going to be a lot of eyeballs on those walls, so I wanted to. And plus, I think it was in one of the early like Iron Lack videos, so I wanted to definitely make sure that Mr. Toilet made an appearance there.
So this one shows all these different worlds combining. To me, it's you as this illustrator, graphic person now doing graphic cartoons, and your style is super polished. I mean, this is really, really clean. You're used to color. Like this is mature, this is like adult graffiti at this point, and very new. I think when you guys came to Miami this year, you guys, did a lot of pieces, and there were some really exceptional ones that, I think, locally really, made an impact, and globally made an impact, as this was shared around the world.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny about what you just said was, I think straddling both sides of like the whole internet social media thing, it's hard for me to like make sense of like people being aware of my stuff, like in other countries and things. Like if I sit there and think of it rationally, I'm like, yeah, of course. But part of my brain is still stuck in the era of like trading physical photos through the mail, and like really just trying to like my goal for the first 2 or 3 years of my career was like, maybe someday I'll get good enough to get something put in like a graffiti magazine. And that was like pretty much all I ever wanted to achieve in terms of like an actual goal or reward or something in this. But, you know, from the beginning, I just love painting. It's, you know, it was just such a zen kind of experience to just be at a wall on a nice day and just, you know, get lost in these ideas and try and make something magical happen. So, so it's weird when, like, you know, you talk about like international stuff. It's still kind of a trip. Like if I'll, you know, get invited to go somewhere overseas and there'll be people that are like legit fans that know stuff about me and have like, you know, magazine clippings or like, you know, stuff that they bring that they want me to sign. And I'm just like, I never expected any of this stuff to happen. Like I still can't really wrap my head around it a lot of times.
Sure. I mean, you know, there's a lot of fans, and it's, you know, and it's really taken off. I mean, I think when you guys came this particular year, and I don't remember the lineup, but I remember you and Rhyme, you know, bumping into you guys. I think Askew was here that year, and the TMDs were here from New Zealand, and there was just a tremendous energy and a tremendous amount of artistic output in Wynwood that year in Miami. Like it was pretty unbelievable. Just everybody that arrived and everybody came, and all the walls that got painted. You know, this one, it was I don't think there was a year quite like that ever again.
Yeah, it's a shame that it kind of just turned into like MTV Spring Break in like the most recent years, but
Yes.
that era was really nice. You know, like it still kind of had a lot of the same vibe of like a Scribble Jam or a Paint Lewis type of thing.
Yes, I agree. And everybody heard about it, and everybody wanted to come down and paint and hang out. I mean, and sadly enough, you know, most of those buildings that got painted, all those sort of, you know, enclosures, and for the most part, they don't exist. They've been developed. The neighborhood has been turned into a much a fancier sort of neighborhood, and not the same warehouse spaces that used to exist to paint. And so for the most part, it's gone, although this building still exists.
Mm.
You know, and again, another example of this stuff, and another example of you bringing in, you know, other elements like this, you know, cartoon style into the middle of your piece. And then, you know, what's interesting, you know, is that you're not just a graffiti artist. You're not just a graffiti writer. You're also a painter, and a studio painter. And so this is around the same time as those pieces.
This was a little later. This was probably maybe like 10, 12 years ago, something like that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
2010 or so.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the same time as this.
Yeah. I would say that they're probably within like 3 or 4 years, I think.
So explain, you know, so for those of us that don't know, when did you say, hey, I am not only just a writer painting in the streets or on freights, but I'm also have a studio practice? Was that always happening?
Yeah, I mean, I was always doing art prior to doing graffiti. Graffiti was just kind of like a different avenue to go down that I really just loved the, you know, the physicality of it, being outside, you know, creeping around at night, doing illegal stuff, like all those things that kind of are alluring to like a teenager stuck with me. So that was like a perfect marriage of, you know, both the creative side and kind of the illegal, like mischievous side. But yeah, I mean, throughout, before graffiti, during, and, you know, currently I'm still always doing other like artistic pursuits, you know, painting, illustration, graphic design, that type of stuff.
And so was that what you ended up going to university for?
Well, I mean, I went to like a regular university. It wasn't like a specifically like an art school. And I got, you know, Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, but it wasn't like a serious like art education. It was just like I build, you know, enough credits to get that as my degree. But yeah. And realistically, I don't think I really learned that much while I was in college. I think most of what I've learned painting and just art wise in general, I kind of picked up on my own, or there's a couple cases of things that I sort of learned in school, but they didn't really teach it very well. Like things like color theory that
Yes.
I picked up on a lot later on. And I was like, oh, that was probably why they had us painting these like grids of different colors where you would kind of fade from dark to light, mixing it down with black or with white, or, you know, like that type of stuff. But they didn't really explain how you applied that. So I never really got the point of why they were making us do it. It wasn't till way later that I saw like the value of that stuff. And honestly, like, I think since we're talking about, you know, graffiti and other stuff, graffiti is certain colors and color theory stuff that I apply to my drawing, I can apply to my graffiti. Stuff that I apply to my graffiti, I can apply to my oil painting. You know, it's just like I mentally, I try not to even put too many sections between one discipline and the other. I kind of just let the edges get blurry, because
Sure.
I think there's a lot of you know, things that are useful, you know, across those borders or whatever.
And so this particular work that we see in front of us here, can you tell us about this? I think this was at Known Gallery. Is that correct?
Yeah, this was my first solo show. I think my first solo show I've really ever done. And I did one in Minneapolis, but yeah, my first real solo show at Known Gallery. This was damn, I can't remember the name of it. Oh, Revisionist History. And this was basically a series of paintings that I kind of developed over maybe like 2 or 3 months. I got the idea as I was falling asleep about, I just envisioned like some Klansmen playing basketball. I get these really like vivid images in this like couple minutes as I'm like going from conscious to unconscious sometimes right before I fall asleep. And I had this vision of like a Klansman like doing a layup, and then like I just started imagining like different scenarios of like Klansmen playing basketball, and it was like such a profoundly like weird image. I was like, yeah, this was the first one from that series. This was part of a group show. Did the Revisionist History show, my solo show. But yeah, this was essentially like one of the images that popped into my head. And so I was about to fall asleep, and I like made myself get up and like do a quick sketch because I didn't want to forget it by the time I woke up the next day. And then I made the painting because I think they invited me into this group show right around that same time. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna put this one in it, just like freak people out. And actually, I think that's probably the favorite one of that entire series. It was the first one I did.
So what was what was the public reaction?
It was weird because I don't think people really knew what to think about it. You know, like if you just walked up to this show and you had no idea who was doing it or whatnot, it would be probably a little jarring. And I felt like either
I think we just lost EWOK. Somehow we just lost EWOK. I'm gonna try to get him back on here. Let's see if we can do that, because we're just sort of getting into, you know, this other body of work that, you know, is a bit of a departure from his graffiti, but also, you know, very valuable, and just shows sort of, you know, how artists could be writers. They could be, you know, studio artists, they could be illustrators and designers, and doing it all simultaneously, very multifaceted. And so we want to try to get them on to continue this conversation. But I'll take this opportunity to say thank you so much to everybody for joining us and being on here with us for this hour to discuss EWOK and his body of work. So he'll be joining us. Boom, there you go. You're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I hit the wrong thing.
So yeah, no, I think it's totally jarring. It's totally shocking, and it's something that I probably would never have wanted to see in my life. An image of or the Klan playing ball. Or at least it's better than them going out and doing what they normally do when they put on their hoods.
Sure.
But yeah, so what I was saying before we jumped off is that showing these two things at the same time, and showing what you're doing on the street and juxtaposing it with what you're doing in the studio, it just shows that many writers are just overall artists. And graffiti is one lane, and they might be doing graphics as well at the same time, and in the studio making paintings at the same time. And all these things are happening in your life at the very same time. But for those of us like yourself that fall in love with the graffiti movement and the graffiti sort of action or the world, it ends up still playing a role in your life while these other things start to take off.
Yeah.
And so, when I saw these and I started to try to figure out the years, I'm like, these are happening while you're still bombing, or these are happening while you're still doing, painting productions, and probably also freelancing, maybe making, graphics. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just speaks to like, I just really like art, like I get bored with stuff easily. So I like to keep it fresh and do different things all the time. I think doing one thing helps another thing, and just keeps, I think it also, when you don't confine all of your creativity to one field, you're able to like make hybrids, like not only with ideas, but with techniques and all that kind of stuff. So I think just one hand kind of washes the other when it comes to like doing graffiti, painting, illustration, design, all that kind of stuff. It's all kind of coming from the same creative source. It's just expressing itself in different ways.
Sure. No, and I like, you explaining how they like they inform each other.
Yeah.
And that you personally allow that to be the case, and that are open for whatever overlap or might happen.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just kind of go through a few of these images to share with our viewers, so they could see more of the work that you've done in more recent years. I mean, obviously this is not new stuff, but just to sort of get an understanding of the different things that you've explored with your painting, especially with your street painting, and not just here, but around the world. I think, is this the one that's in Colombia?
Yeah, that's in Bogota.
Right. And so now you're traveling, you're part of the Iron Lac team, and you're going around the world. What was that like?
It's fantastic. I mean, I got put on basically by Askew. That was my first international trip. I went to New Zealand, but yeah, I never imagined I'd be able to go anywhere because I like to spray paint shit on walls. It just kind of happened, and I started getting opportunities to go places, and it was really weird too. I think around the time that we were doing Life Sucks Die magazine, this girl that I was dating in college, she would always take advantage of the like study abroad programs and stuff. And I always thought it was super weird. Like, why would you want to leave the United States? Like, we got all the cool shit here. Like, we make the coolest, music and movies and blah, blah, blah. And I just had this very like kind of dumb naive, like America-centric worldview. And then once I started actually getting the opportunity to travel and see, you know, other stuff, I was like, oh, I had it totally wrong. You know, just being able to see different cultures, experience different foods and, you know, music and art and everything that comes with, you know, culture. It just, it shows you how amazing humanity is. And I think that in a lot of ways is some of the limitations a lot of these idiot people that are like, you know, super these colors don't run type people, you know, like if you've never left here, you don't really know what you're talking about in terms of anything, you know, if you're talking about politics or anything like that, you know.
Right. You got to open your mind and learn about culture and learn about humanity through humans.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the best way to do it.
And so, you know, you start traveling. I don't know where these are, but the reason why I wanted to show this particular one compared to what we just saw in Bogota is that there's I would say a radical departure in your style from that to this.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? What was your decision to go in this particular direction? Can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, there was a point where I was probably looking at, yeah, I think one of these type of situations where I had to compile a bunch of photos to send to somebody for something. And so I'm trying to gather a bunch of photos and I'm just like, I don't really like this one. And I started realizing that a lot of the stuff I was doing that was really heavy on the special effects and like rendering and, you know, textures and 3D kind of stuff. Like it's cool, kind of like eye candy for people, but I felt like in some ways it was taking away from the letter forms. And as much as I appreciate the tradition of graffiti, I wanted to start making stuff that was going to be more timeless, you know. Like I noticed, you know, if you look at like freight stuff from the 90s, especially stuff, you know, coming out of like a lot of Midwest cities or like Texas, like some of that stuff is so hard on the eyes. It doesn't like hold up over time. But you can look at stuff from, you know, like spray can art, subway art era that's still amazing by today's standards. And so I really started kind of putting my work into that kind of perspective, being like, I need to scale back on the trickery and like the, you know, special effects stuff and just really focus on letters more. And with the goal of eventually applying both of those things to kind of complement one another. But I felt like there was a point where I went too overboard with the special effects and like the rendering, where it was kind of taking away from the actual structure of the pieces. So this was more of a concerted effort, like this era of trying to get better letters, you know, and then add the rendering elements as kind of supplementing those things.
I understand, and I think you definitely are using it in that way. It's a supplement versus the main part of it that you saw earlier in the work. I mean, you see it again here.
Yeah. I mean, I think like I want the letters to be front and center, and then give you more stuff to look at within those letters, but I don't want to put it the other way around where it's just a bunch of, you know, doodads and rendering and stuff without a solid structure to support it.
I get it. No, I can see how these look less like period pieces and more could, you know, it could be from different periods, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you do them like this as well. There's no letters. This is one of your paintings.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought it's such a beautiful piece, and I just wanted to share this with our audience to show once again how these two sort of worlds, you know, meet within your work. You know, here you have that sort of organic, you know, rendering you know, these worlds with no graffiti, no letters.
Yeah, there was a time when I would say, like, when I was focusing more on the letters and less on the rendering stuff, that I would kind of do the letters, and then at the end I'd be like, okay, now I can have fun, and I would figure out all the places that I can make it look melty or all that kind of stuff. And that was always like the funnest part. And then I was like, well, you know, like, nobody's forcing me to paint any of this stuff. Like, I can just paint the fun part. And so I did some walls where it was just the organic stuff, just because I wanted to, like, I, I I think, like, the headache of painting a piece is, like, you got to make all your letters dope. You know, like, if you have like a whack W or a whack O or something, it kind of weighs down the whole piece. But doing this type of style, you know, whether it's on paper or on a wall, it's kind of just going with the feel. Like, you sort of just come up with a composition and then fill it in with, like, the effects. But the composition is not governed by, you know, dope letter forms. So you
So
can
there's a
kind of
bit more
you can kind of just have,
more freedom.
yeah, yeah, I can just, like, really flex the part that's fun to paint or that's challenging or whatever, and not have the pressure of, like, coming up with a dope piece every time. So I was doing a couple pieces where I would just show up at the wall and just paint something like that, and that was it. You know, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be letters, even though, like, I'm in love with graffiti letters, but it's a lot of responsibility every time to, like, do something good. Um,
I understand. And so, I mean, how much were you influenced, or were you influenced at all by like horror films or monster movies, or, you know, like, where is these environments coming from?
I mean, I wouldn't say it was a uh, direct influence, but, you know, like every other kid in high school, I was super into, like, Geiger and, you know, shit like that. Um, yeah, I
I
don't
get
know.
it. I get it. It's like Aliens and Geiger, and
Yeah,
you know, it's also like the stuff that we would expect for artists that are working for Heavy Metal Magazine to come up with, or Mobius, or, you
yeah,
know,
yeah. I
Frazetta, or
love
whatever.
all that stuff.
And so there you see it, you know, slightly in there, and I guess in the shapes, uh, and then, you know, again, to show, you know, you simplifying,
Hmm.
you know, your work, and as you mentioned, removing the I would say, like, you know, the gimmicks, or removing all that stuff to really strip it down to the most basics of graffiti, which is just purely the letter. And, you know, one of the things that I appreciate in some of these pieces that are recurring is you have these recurring characters, police pigs, you know, and this
Mm.
is, you know, you've been doing them for a while, and it seems like, you know, I don't know if it's Minneapolis that's got you like this, or that you're a black man in America, you know, but what is it about
All of the above.
all of the above, and that you're a writer, but,
Yeah.
you know, you really take aim at the police in your work.
Yeah, I mean, I hate police. Like, it was weird. I was telling my friend about this story the other day. I was at a Chipotle, and I walk in the door and I get in line, and, like, at the back of the line there's two like, highway sheriffs or whatever. And, you know, whatever. Like, I didn't have any reason to be freaked out about anything, but I just don't like police. And the cop turns around and he, like, kind of looks me up and down, and I was like, all right, here we go. And he starts talking to me, and he's like, oh, you know, are you into art? And I was like, yeah, why? And he's like, oh, I just saw your shirt, and I was wearing a shirt from, like, one of the art festivals I went to in Denmark. It was, like, in the city called Aarhus. And he's like, where is that? And I said, oh, it's in Denmark. And the guy was just like,
Wait, Wait, say that
Are you
again. We
there?
just lost you for a second. Yeah, I'm here. So the guy said what?
The guy was he was mad cool. Like, he just started talking to me about art and stuff. And he's like, yeah, my neighbor's a painter. I go over there all the time. He's like, it's like, what kind of medium do you do? And he was just like really like sincerely curious about it. And it like freaked my whole brain out because I've just been conditioned to like hate these dudes, and normally I just steer clear, but this is just in line at Chipotle. So I didn't really even know I don't have a moral to the story. I'm just relaying something. But yeah, I mean, I would say on the balance, like, police have not really given me or themselves like the benefit of the doubt. I think in a lot of cases, you see time and time again how they abuse their authority. And
Absolutely.
I've had X amount of run-ins with police that have gone badly. And I don't know. I mean, I would say generally speaking, I only reserve this type of thinking for police only because they had the choice to be police. Like, I don't lump any other groups of people into one category where I've just automatically out of the gate have malice towards them. But I feel like on the balance, they've pretty much earned that. So
Yeah, I would say that I have to agree with you on that.
yeah.
So again, stripped down, really classic, clean, and effective, and then just in case, people wonder, there is, drafting, there is illustration, there's design that goes behind this. I mean, are you sketching a lot of your work or most of it, or how's it been for you?
There was a long time where I didn't really sketch. Every piece I did was like a freestyle, but I feel more like, and this was one of the things I learned from a lot of like the European writers, is they're very prepared a lot of times with the sketches. And they'll like go to bed early so they can get up and be like fresh the next, like, as Americans, we kind of just go for it 100% all the time. Like, we don't like I don't think we have the discipline that a lot of like the European writers do.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like when I was freestyling all my pieces, I liked it in the sense that I never knew what I was going to end up with at the end of the day. And a lot of times I would stumble onto something that was like kind of an interesting idea or technique or, whatever. But after looking at like 10 or 12 of those type of pieces, I felt like I needed to go further with those little sparks. Like, I would get a little something that was interesting, but I hadn't seen it through to actually develop it into something that, it had more potential to be. So I kind of like to go back and forth between, improvising things and being prepared. A lot of times when I'll go to the wall, I'll have at least, maybe one or two of the letters sketched. I started doing a thing actually where when I'm just doodling or sketching, like, when I'm at work or whatever, I'll draw like an E, or I'll draw a W or a K or whatever. And I just have a folder on my phone of just different single letters. So sometimes, like, if I get stuck or if I'm freestyling something and I'm like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna, freak this W, I'll just like scroll through my folder and find like a W that might fit in that spot. So it's kind of it's a combination of like freestyling and having some level of preparedness, I guess.
I understand. Again, and here you see, in this you see, that you're the illustrator in you come out. And I started seeing these kind of pieces around when you're adding these sort of, cartoon sort of worlds in it, not as fierce as an alien landscape with Geiger creatures coming through it, but a little bit, I don't know, less dark, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that last piece you showed, I think I started doing these very colorful pieces. Like, I was hanging out with my guy Rhyme, and he got me to try mushrooms this one time, and I just noticed from that point forward, all my pieces were like super colorful. Whereas like, I think prior to that, I was doing a lot of kind of monochromatic pieces.
Yes.
But from that point forward, I pretty much just bring like every color I had, or at least try and have like the whole spectrum kind of covered, and just figure out a way to use as many colors as I could. And I didn't really even notice it until maybe 6 months later that I was like, oh, that was probably like the catalyst for that.
Interesting. And it's amazing how psilocybin can do that, how mushrooms can do that to your brain.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and then this. What project was this? This is a music project, correct?
Yeah, this was an album cover for some Minneapolis peoples. It was like an R&B, not R&B. I don't know what the right genre is, but it's there was a group called Zulu Zulu, and then they changed their name to Astral Black, and they asked me to do their cover, and I kind of just went crazy with it. Like they wanted kind of like a forgot the term. It's like the future. What's the
Afrofuturism?
Yeah. Like that was kind of the vibe they were going for. So I like bugged out on a lot of those references and was looking at like, I was already kind of into the aesthetic of like the old like Santana and like Miles Davis, like Bitches Brew album covers.
Yes,
so I wanted to do kind of a modern version of that type of thing.
I think you nailed it. It does feel like the Miles Davis Bitches Brew and Santana, and you know, and a bit of maybe somehow Fela Kuti or something in there as well.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, obviously for those of you that don't know, you also, you know, done a lot of graphics for t-shirt brands or designs, right?
Yeah, I did a bunch of stuff for like Seventh Letter, Ruka, I don't know, various other companies over the years.
I love this one.
Thank you.
This is the take on the praying hands. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the original is Frederick Dewar or something like that. Dewar.
Okay. Yeah. Very famous. It's sort of like an iconic image, and this is your own spin on it. Tell us what the inspiration besides that reference for this? Whose hands are these?
I just started making these creepy kind of like sort of devilish like reptilian hands. I just got like really into like doing hands for a while because I was always really bad at hands, so I wanted to like really focus on doing some decent hands at some point, and this was just a good excuse to kind of combine all those things. I was I started doing a lot of like reptilian influence graphics just because I think it's kind of amusing, like hearing Alex Jones do his whole shtick where he'll talk about the reptilians and like these chemicals that make frogs turn gay and stuff. And like what's crazy is like he's such a like loathsome, gross person, but he's very good at what he does in terms of just making a spectacle out of himself. And so I kind of just I like the concepts of stuff that's absurd, not necessarily the thing itself, but I like using that as like an inspiration to kind of create stuff around. So I think that was part of what this was.
Yeah, you recently released a T-shirt that's reptilian on your own site that, you know, makes me, you know, immediately think about that, and you know, and all the talk of like humans as reptiles and you know, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, did you see V when you were a kid?
I did see V when I was a kid.
Yeah, so I think it, you know, kind of touched on a lot of those notes as well.
And this one I like just because of its, you know, statement on war.
Yeah.
And was this also for a t-shirt graphic, or what was this for?
I think it was intended to be a t-shirt graphic, but it just never really found a home anywhere that it made sense. And then somewhere along the way, Eclipse from the Seventh Letter is friends with one of the dudes from, I'm trying to remember the name of that group. The guy recently died. Linkin Park. And so
Okay.
they I think they'd used some of that artwork like on their tour bus or something.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And then here's another example of a t-shirt graphic for Ruka.
Yeah.
And this is a great one.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite t-shirts I've ever done. And it's not even my idea, but I just liked sort of hijacking the classic. I would see all the like kids that smoked in high school wearing that shirt, and I would just stare at it in class like the whole time.
Just the Metallica
Yeah.
rip is awesome. I never saw this one before today, and I just think it's amazing. It's so fun and so cool, and it's like you'll miss it. You would think it's just Metallica if you see it. And you got to do a double take on it.
Plus, I got to include the toilet in it too, so it was.
And
like
you got the toilet, exactly.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that I've seen you post that's so good are things like this, which are just sort of these graffiti illustrations that you normally see like in a black book or something, but again they're so cool. And I think the use of color, the vividness, these sort of sunsets or these sort of other world sort of planets but with graffiti on it are so cool. And I'm seeing like sort of recurring themes of these trucks or vehicles that are alive. Is this just one of these fun exercises that you've been doing?
Yeah, I don't know what. There was a weird mural at a gas station by my house where he made these cars that had like faces on them that was kind of similar. I don't think I even realized that was like subconsciously part of that, but I would go to this gas station all the time and just look at this mural, and it wasn't very good, but I still like was influenced by it. And then I just wanted to I kind of wanted to like humanize the vehicles, because when how like the military sells all the extra equipment that they didn't bother using or couldn't figure out a way to use back to the police departments so that they can terrorize like domestic communities with them.
Yes.
And I sort of just started associating like just like they try and make the vehicles look extra like thugged out, where they'll be like all blacked out and just they just try and make the vehicles look like really mean.
Yeah.
Like it's like part of like the whole intimidation factor. So I wanted to kind of personify that as well. And so I started doing these cop cars where like the actual car has like an angry face on it, and they they'll be like arms like holding guns like hanging out of all the windows, like just yes. I wanted to make it like the most potent form of like fear and intimidation I could, but like in this kind of cartoony way.
Yeah. I've seen it before, and I love that within these illustrations, there's a political statement. It's not just it's sort of adult graffiti. It's adult illustrations. It's not made necessarily for children, or you're not thinking that way anymore. Like there's meaning behind, I would imagine the reason why you chose Exxon and have these oil fields is purposeful, and it looks like it's the earth, it's on earth or something like that, right?
Yeah. I like to shit on corporations that deserve it. So whenever I'm like doing backgrounds, I'll put billboards for like Walmart or Amazon, all the top companies that have kind of exploited, you know, millions of people and sort of not paid taxes and, you know, all the
destroying the
evil things
planet.
that the goals of capitalism, basically. I try and go out of my way to like shit on them as much as I can.
And are these like for personal projects, or I mean, are these works that you're making to sell or to show, or you know, what do these end up?
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
Okay, are you there?
Yeah, just cut out for a second. If you said something, I didn't
So,
hear it.
so the question is, you know, you make these, but you know, but where do these great drawings end up?
I don't know. I can't remember where this one went. I don't know if I still have that one or not. It's like lately I've been trying to sell them just because COVID and being, you know, needing money and whatnot. But this one was originally done for when LP did his solo album. He had a track on there called Dead Disney, and we had used this this kind of Mickey Mouse. He had like an axe behind his back and like the dollar sign eyes. We had used that as one of the icons for some Life Sucks Die magazine merch. Like I think we'd made T-shirts and a couple things. And when LP started like Def Chucks, they for whatever reason had seen this Mickey Mouse that I had done and hit me up about. They wanted to license just the image as it was. And so I kind of used this as like a way to shoehorn actually doing some specific art for it. So I had to turn this thing around in like 2 days, which was insane because I basically was just chugging 5-hour energy drinks trying to get it done on deadline. And then as it turned out, they didn't even end up using it. Like it was supposed to be on the album jacket for the single, but
Yeah,
apparently their lawyers were smart and decided to not have them get sued by Disney. So they just put it on these crappy little like stickers on the inside of the like plain album jacket. So I was pretty pissed because I didn't really get I didn't really get paid very much for this. I think it was only like maybe $700 or something, and I basically killed myself to try and get it done in like 48 hours, and then they didn't even end up using it. And then I got like a really shitty email from LP when I tried to like convince him to still use it. And so I was like off of LP for about 10 years up until Run the Jewels. And I'm like, well, I guess I have to start
yeah,
listening to it again because they're pretty dope.
yeah. I can understand that. And so, what was the medium? What'd you paint this on or with or?
It was mainly like acrylic and those crappy little like craft paints that you get for $1 or $2 at the at Michael's.
Yeah.
It was just really flat, like, you know, like these kind of bottle paints.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I wanted to show this one. I think this might even be the last image, just because again, the menacing 5-0 pig is back. You know, your pieces are clean. You know, they're without the technical wizardry that we've been seeing, but there is this other underlying statement that you're choosing to share, and sort of using your power as a public artist, as someone that's painting in the street, to call attention to the murder of Oscar Grant, as an example.
Yeah, this was on a wall that was actually maybe like 2 blocks away from Fruitvale Station in Oakland too, where he got murdered. So I thought it was appropriate to you know, give him his shout out or whatever, and also, you know, use it as an opportunity to shit on police.
And so you know, whether it's, you know, for those of you that obviously that know EWOK's work and follow him online, you can tell that he's you know, thinking and about the world and about oppression and about politics and about abuse of power. It's sort of these recurring themes that appear in your social media feed or in your stories, and you're a great reposter of content that's like blows me away all the time. So I really appreciate you as like a source of news. Um, and so, you know, I encourage all of you that don't follow him or are not consuming that content or seeing that to give him a look, because he does a great job of sort of editing the internet or editing social media in a very shocking way and in a very telling way, of whether it's the Karens or, you know, all
I
this
love
other
it.
stuff that I could appreciate.
Who doesn't
don't
love a
have
good
time.
Karen? Yeah.
Right. And you know, and so I love that you know, sort of fascination or awareness also ends up coming out in your art, through your illustration, also in your paintings. You're not just a sort of armchair sort of person, you know, that you're in the trenches. You really, you know, put out there what you believe, and you're like whole in that way. And so, you know, myself, I could really appreciate that. And I think that that's important to have a voice in this day and age, and always, you know, and to use it to bring awareness to injustice and all this bullshit and all this, you know, terrible things that we see happening and we feel almost powerless about. But using your voice, I think, is critical. And so, you know, I thank you for that and for the work that you do. And obviously, thank you for the, you know, all this, you know, decades of putting in work in the streets, on the trains, around the world, with Iron Lack. Now, you know, seeing you selling your work directly online and making it accessible to us. You know, I think that that's a real gift, you know, that you're opening yourself up to that. And so I encourage everybody to check out, you know, your posts, because you're always posting that, you know, your newest pieces, and they're off the wall, and they're phenomenal, and they're unique. They're your own sort of, you know, your visual imagery. And so, again, thank you for being open to that, and thank you for what you do. And someone, you know, posted up a comment here that you're battling. You have a battle coming up, and so.
Yeah, I'm battling Arabs in Seattle this weekend on Saturday. He's coming off of his latest battle win that I was actually a judge for a battle that he was in with some other like writers from Washington, you know, a couple weeks ago. So it's going to be a challenge. He's definitely good. I'm not taking him lightly by any stretch.
Good. Well, sounds like it's going to be a fun time, and
Yeah.
probably no you know, violence or these things that we were used to as teenagers.
No, it's going to get super violent, I think. No, it'll be
Good.
It'll be chill.
On the wall. Now, listen, I you know, I really want to say that I appreciate your time tonight. We went way over time, and so I really appreciate you hanging out and spending all this time with us. Again, this is EWOK. My name is Alan Kett. You've been listening to us at Art Talk with the Museum of Graffiti. And for all of you that didn't catch this whole talk, this talk will be saved. It'll be right here on Instagram, on IGTV. It'll also be on YouTube in about a week or so. And so thank you very much for everybody that joined us, and also that contributed a donation to us tonight. Stay tuned for a whole new batch of Art Talks next week. We have some great people coming on. We've got Sonic, old school Sonic from New York City. We have legendary pioneer Staff 161 from the Bronx, one of the first generation of writers. So we're going to have them on, and a whole bunch of other people on as soon as I can convince them to share their story. And so, EWOK, thank you so much. Anything you want to share and let people know, or anything at all?
Just thanks for listening. Yeah, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Much appreciated to you.
Yeah.